Oh, killing me. Oh, hey, good morning. Sorry, I'm words with friends with my mom. We've been for years. She crushes me every time, or almost every time. So, like, anyway, good morning. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday, June 4th. We're really pleased to have you with us today. We'll give it a couple more minutes because it's right at the top of the hour, and we will get started in just a sec. In the meantime, if you're online and live and giving us a watch, let us know who you are and where you're from in the chat. We'd love to hear where everybody is coming in from. Let us know who you are and where you're from and why you're here if you have a chance in the chat. Welcome, Sharon. Is it warm and sunny there? This is a message for our producer, Katie, who's also the director of operations at WideFocus. Katie, maybe we should have like some, upbeat music playing next time while we're waiting for people to join. Something jaunty and interesting. Got it. Sad to hear it. And if you're joining us right now, we're just about to get started. We would love to hear who you are, where you're from, why you're here, a little something about you. You can just pop it into the comments. Hi, Suzanne and Susan. Always love having you on. Uh, Katie, let's get rolling because it is 11:03 and we have a lot to get through today. All right. Good morning for some of us, I guess. We're really excited to have our guests on the webinar today. As you know, if you've been to these webinars before, it's not just us spouting off. We love working with our strategic partners. We'll tell you a little bit more about WideFocus and who's speaking today. But first, I just kind of want to, I guess, set the stage because, we've been doing a lot of webinars around AI, SEO, AI SEO, GEO, whatever you want to call it. And if you're on social media at all, if you're online at all, you're starting to see a bit of a backlash to that AI speak. It's interesting, right? Because, and this is something we talk about a lot and we're going to talk about today, the AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Google / Gemini, are all searching for authoritative content to bring up in search. And it's because more and more people, as I'm sure you know, and you might be doing this yourself, are using ChatGPT and Claude and the others to get information. And then instead of like looking for links, they're obviously getting full answers and summaries and looking to that information. When I plan travel now, I ask Claude to give me an itinerary and tell me the best places to go. When I'm looking for business solutions, I ask Claude, here's the problem, what's the answer? And we know that LinkedIn is the top authority source for AI on social for B2B questions and answers. So if you're not posting regularly and consistently on LinkedIn as a B2B company, and now even more as a B2C company, you're probably not being seen, you're not being indexed and showing up in these summaries. But at the same time, I don't know about you, but I'm so tired of the AI slop on LinkedIn, and there's starting to be some real backlash about that. And on Instagram, which is indexed by Google and the rest as well on the B2C side. And it's for me, and it's something that's just, I don't know, it breaks my heart. It drives me nuts. You get the short 3-word sentences all in a row. It's not about this, it's about this. You get the anaphora, you get the similes, you get the what actually works, and I will tell you at WideFocus, we have outlawed the word actually from copy for our clients and ourselves because it feels wrong now. And we don't ever use it's not about, it's about anymore because it just has that kind of horrible synthetic feel to it, even if it's accurate, right? So what we're going to talk about today, or what our speakers are going to talk about today, is that you still need that kind of well-organized, written, very easy to parse content, because that's what the AI tools can read best. But you also have to be doing content that's interesting, that people want to read, that's not going to turn them off. You might have some great content that's written by AI. I shouldn't say great. Some content that's written by AI that's great for being picked up by AI, right? And resurfaced in the searches. But when people click through, if it's this horrible slop that just feels synthetic and doesn't feel real, then they're going to, you're losing your credibility. So today, we're going to talk about that. We're going to first talk about more like the technical ways to verify your brand with your website and elsewhere. And then we're going to go through and some of those technical foundations. And then we're going to go through how to humanize and how to make sure that your content is relevant, interesting, and is still being picked up by AI. We're all seeing it now. We're all getting new clients that are coming from ChatGPT or Claude. But how do we get more? How do we stand out in front of the competition? How do we get trusted? That's what this is all about today. So let's talk about who's going to help us with that. And again, if you're just joining us, we would love to hear who you are, where you're from, and anything that you're thinking about right now. Really briefly, if you've been on these webinars before, you know who we are. I started WideFocus way back in 2007. This summer, we are celebrating 19 years in business, managing social media for clients all over the country. And it's always been about social from the beginning. Organic content that is it's been about scroll stopping content that's relevant and interesting, and it reaches your target audiences. But even more now, that content is also being designed and planned to match GEO goals. We do organic, and then we do paid social campaigns that drive numbers that matter. Big improvements in lead generation, website traffic, conversions, all that stuff works together between organic and paid. And that's what we've been doing for almost 19 years now. But the thing is, and I should say we also do influencer marketing and professional thought leadership, but we're not talking about that today. Because we stay in our lane, because we are a social media agency, and because that's where we're best, we love teaming up with agencies and professionals who do the work that we don't, who provide services that our clients need that we can't provide. And one of our favorite teams to work with is VEA Technologies, also here in Denver. They are so good at what they do. They come from a long background of deep insight in web development and overall UX. They're also just hell of nice people. And it's great to team up with them because they can provide structure. They figure out what the website's going to look like. They look at all of these technical pieces to it. They come up with the GEO or SEO strategies. And when we're working together, they say, okay, here's what social should look like for this client. And so we can work really closely together to make sure all of that stuff is aligned. It's a really wonderful symbiotic opportunity for all of us. And that's why I always say we play well with others. We really love working with agencies, and VEA is one of our favorites. So enough of my yapping. Reference for those of you in the know. Today, you're going to hear from two stellar speakers. You will hear from our own Jenna, who has been with us for 2 years now. She is not only a kick-ass community manager and writer, she's also our leader when it comes to AI integrations and the work we're doing in-house. She's also my very close collaborator on the B2B side in creating content that matters. And so she's here today, and our friend Graham from VEA, who will introduce himself in just a moment. Graham's amazing, and like I said, VEA is just a really cool organization to work with. We learned yesterday through this, or 2 days ago through this run through, just the breadth of knowledge and understanding of what he brings to the table. And yeah, I think it's time to pass it on to him. Before we go to that, though, I want to let you know we will have room for Q&A at the end, but if you have questions that come up along the way, please drop them in the chat. I'm happy to, if I need to jump in and ask it, because we are going to try to make this a little more conversational than usual, or otherwise we'll make sure that you get answered at the end. So Graham, take it away.
Yeah, thanks for a lovely intro, Eric. Jenna, really excited to join you, and just fantastic opportunity to get in front of all of our audience as well. Thanks for joining. So Eric introduced VEA. VEA Technologies is Denver, Boulder, Columbia-based agency. We've got great teams spread out across there. And as he explained, we are very tech focused. So big background on the design dev side, but also here for tech-led campaigns. And what we've been seeing for years is that authority and relevance were always really central to all of the work that we're doing for clients, helping them demonstrate that. Now, just in the last 3 to 5 years, there's also an expectation, a market requirement that you're verifiable. And so in our mind, verifiable is becoming just incredibly important. And we're going to break down what that means in the coming slides and how to really accomplish that, both from the technical as well as from your creative and content-oriented side. There's opportunities on both, but also requirements and a lot of work to be done on both sides. So in our mind, what is a verifiable brand? First of all, it's something that companies of all sizes should really aspire to. This isn't trying to be a Fortune 100 company where everyone immediately recognizes your logo, knows your brand colors. What it really is ensuring that you've got that right company around you, right? People are speaking well of you, and those people are trusted, that you're being found, and that your content and creative is living up to that as well. I think Eric already said it, scroll stopping content. But also where that content is living is something that people trust, and they see engagement, they see communication, they see others jumping in. So as we break this down, we're going to be talking a lot about the technical side. That's where I'll be leaning into our expertise and speaking to that. And then jumping over to the creative side, I'll be hitting on that, but that's really where Jenna's going to pick up and start moving forward on that. All right, so let's set the stage of what being verifiable means, what having authority or relevance might have required in the past. And the first thing we want to call out is all of us are playing, working, doing so much in an ever-evolving environment. 20 years ago, it was probably enough to build your brand just on your website and to have some campaigns pointing there. And then search engines, and then directories and social networks all expanded that playing field. And they did so in a way that has always gone back to some of those main concepts, right? Authority, relevance, right? Trying to ensure that you're providing trust signals. And if you do that well, then you'll be found more often. People will be trusting you. Where we're at currently is really, the last 3 to 5 years, the LLMs, all of, OpenAI, Gemini, your Perplexity, all of that has really expanded out the environment because you're being found on there as well as other places where that's getting inserted. That might be on Google in AI overviews, that might be in their actual apps. And then there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other integrations that pull that info in. So we're looking at an infinitely growing landscape. And you think about that and the scale, and it's pretty challenging to think about, how do you build trust across all of that, right? You might be getting in front of new audiences, or you might be meeting your current audience in new places. And what we want to convey is that there are a lot of tools and approaches and initiatives that let you achieve that without, having to do it step by step, place by place yourself. So we'll be getting into those in the coming slides. So first one, let's think about the strategies that enable you to do this. You're not alone, right? You don't have to do this by yourself. There is some great tech and tools and then approaches that are going to help you. We need to think about those and start thinking through the strategies so that you're working in a way that sets up those technical foundations, that lets others, other tools, other systems, other platforms easily digest and find your content, and then ensure that it's getting updated consistently. And for the last point, so far we're talking a lot about the technical side, we're talking about the details, we're going to start showing how to do that. But what we would communicate alongside that is, the written technical content, it needs to be supported by great design too. It's just a quick way for people to also have that trust and to direct their eyes to the right places. You don't want to have placement in a great search result or an LLM that's referencing your brand and then have the wrong logo, an old logo, or have one that's, the wrong size, or your creative's just, been skewed. So ensuring all of that is also accomplished is really large, important initiative. Okay, so we want to get into some of the tools. What I would say to communicate here is there's 3 areas that we're really excited about from the technical side, and they should overlap really nicely with Jenna and some of the points she's going to be making about content and how WideFoc.us thinks about working content into all of these areas. So in the bullets, we have 3 groupings and approaches, and then a couple examples of some of the tools that we're going to flesh out in upcoming slides. First is thinking about syncing across directories. Directories give you an opportunity to take your information and push it to hundreds of different areas. Some of those might be directories, others might be social platforms where your information lives. So how do you do that in a way that goes from one to many? Then we'll start looking into schema markup, which is, back-end code, back-end structure for all of the data and information that lives on your web properties, and ensuring that different entities that are crawling your site quickly understand that and can make sense of your data. And then finally, verification. Right? That is a huge part of this and something that has really took off in just the last couple of years. C2PA, great acronym, feels like it's right out of Star Wars. I'm about it. We'll break down some of that as well. And Jenna, I realize we've got you on. Before we get into the tools, is there anything else that you would just, feel naturally speaking to, or points that you wanted to confirm from your side?
Yeah, definitely. I think having the tools at hand is super important, and understanding that using those types of tools to get seen with AI. And it does really go hand in hand with what I'll be talking about as well, which is the actual type of engagement. But again, I think it's so important that you have AI back to be able to be discovered, because it's really all about discovery at the end of the day. So yeah.
All right. So first one, Yext is a tool that is commonly used, and I think, fair number of people who are in the digital spheres are going to have heard of it. It's a publicly traded company. It, is a subscription model, and so that challenges people sometimes. This idea that like you're always going to be paying for it. But the other side of it is there is incredible value and efficiency to be gained from a tool that can push, any updates to your information out across hundreds and hundreds of integrations. And they've done a really nice job keeping up with this shift from, a smaller set of directories, sites like Google Business Profile or a Yelp or potentially map listings. And now they've kept up with integration into social networks, ensuring your information is accurate there, incredibly important. And thinking about also that shift into, AI and LLMs, how they're bringing in that information. So for this tool, one of the things that we've seen is, those different shifts, but also a great job keeping up with local SEO. We've been incredibly excited that there has been almost a movement back to re-embrace local SEO and favor local brands. For some of our audience today, that might be a great thing. If you have multiple locations, if you have multiple offices, you are likely benefiting from this. And then for some of the national companies that maybe you're more of a provider of a service or solution, that might have actually challenged you, and you might have seen drops in maybe some of your SEO rankings, maybe some of your traffic. Overall, we think it's still a good thing, and it's one that Yext really has helped too. We call out specifically NAP, name, address, and phone. Maintaining that, that's kind of one of those one-to-one abilities to push content, to push updates, and then to make sure that you have that consistency that provides authority, and then in turn gets you onto areas that will help verify your brand, the details, the kind of the small details that really build trust and help larger organizations present your brand in a way that they trust as well. All right, so into schema. Your website, your web properties, massive amount of data on there. And I like to use the analogy, kind of think about like your grandma's recipes or whoever in your family was the best cook. They probably have recipe cards, huge amounts of data, huge amounts of information, maybe even stories. It might have come from your grandma's best friend or, a club that she was part of. But they were also scribbled on there 20, 30 years ago in pen that might have faded, with different measuring tools than what you might use. I like my friend's story of his grandma's recipe saying a cup. And over time, he realized a cup didn't mean a measuring cup, but the cup that she had in her kitchen at all times. So we bring this up to say data lives in lots of different ways. And at the scale of the internet, the volume of how much is being processed, schema provides that opportunity to get your data, your information, your brand translated in a way that is easily accepted. And it can pass on so much about your brand, not just the name, the address, the phone number, but also who is your brand, right? Thinking about people, who's writing the content, who's present on a webinar. Thinking about FAQs and how-tos, right? Very detailed areas to demonstrate your subject matter expert, to be humble as a brand, to explain how people should work with your products or your services or your solutions. Now, the requirements are you do want to make it AI friendly. So JSON has become a very commonly used approach for that language. And the big thing that we would stress here is there are great open source free tools. Use these and just verify how things look, right? The second you're pushing, get it up, validate it, make sure that it looks right, because there are a lot of different ways that this gets pushed out, and you just want to ensure consistency across Google, right? Across, how it might present in ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Going through this is an incredibly important part of the process. All right, into C2PA. Love the acronym, but even more so, I think I love that there's a coalition, for content provenance and authority. And these are large companies, some of the largest ones that we've already mentioned, right? Google, we've got companies like OpenAI, but also a lot of creative companies as well. This is something Adobe would be completely latched onto, because what we're experiencing is that there is great content in this world, beautiful imagery, fantastic testimonials, social content that is directly from real people, generated by your actual audience, right? Your users, your buyers, your advocates. The unfortunate side is that deep fakes, stock imagery, just fake reviews, all of this is happening more and more. And we've got to reach this tipping point where there is a lot of skepticism around lots of different types of content, and frustrations about how content's being reused or manipulated. So CTPA picked up, I think it really took off about a year ago. So don't be alarmed if you're just now hearing about it for the first time. This is a movement for strong brands. Had to say that twice to get it right. To just demonstrate their credibility and to really show that in a way where there's a digital trail behind the content. Something that lets people, work into it and to see that the testimonial is real, proving origin, an individual, and then in turn, helping skeptics. I think skepticism's good, but helping skeptics build trust in what you're putting out. And I think that's fantastic for companies like WideFocus, who are working a lot closer with audiences than perhaps VEA typically does, where we are building technical foundations and campaigns, and then handing it off to content partners, creative partners, companies that we really trust like WideFocus, for them to latch onto and just build and generate great content. And that's often built around audiences who are engaged, who are trustworthy, and who are willing to share and speak on behalf of brands. All right, so just going to wrap up my side and then invite Jenna in for maybe a quick recap before we get into content and creative. But what I would want to convey is that for brands of all size, look at these initiatives and think about the frequency and the cadence that works for your company. You do not have to be doing all of these on a quarterly basis. Some of these we would urge you to do. And some of these are going to look really intimidating for small brands to do quarterly. Now, for a large brand, you might have to be doing these quarterly or monthly, depending on how frequently you're launching campaigns, opening new locations, changing staff, bringing in new products to the market. So for all of these, there's a nice approach that's kind of laid out. If you're doing 2 or 3 of these, you're probably in good water. if you're thinking, hey, we really want to get to a more mature brand status, a more verified, trusting, authoritative place, especially in a digital realm, try to get up to 4 or 5. And again, going back to this concept, use the tools. Like, don't expect your team to be able to do all of this. Have your team own the frameworks and the initiatives and the strategy, but then find ways by either working directly with those tools or finding a tech-focused partner to ensure that you can do this in a way that really works for your brand. All right, so I'm gonna just speak to one case study. This is some work that was really close to my heart. I used to work at a company called Logarithm, cybersecurity brand, and this same idea of being relevant, authoritative, and verifiable of the utmost importance to Logarithm. And this is because we're working with cybersecurity professionals. The level of accuracy and trust that they have to have in receiving any content, not just marketing, but any content, right? Documentation about products, information about threats, all of that is at the highest level. And so how do you become a verifiable and trusted brand? And how do you do that without them ever even potentially having worked with your product? First thing you need to do is find ways to build out your brand beyond just your product or your software, right? Who are the people behind your brand? And for Logarithm, that was the Logarithm Labs team. They are what we would call threat researchers. So thinking about the people who are on the front line and are finding exploits, they're finding, bad actors, they're finding groups that are trying to hack, and then they're communicating what's happening back to the industry, not just reserving that information for Logarithm, but for their peers, for our competitors and others. And this was such a beautiful way to build a brand because it was very giving. It was very humbling in that you're trying to provide value. Love brands that provide value. And how do you do that? Well, you need to start with technical foundations that let others trust what you're providing, right? High accuracy, high security, and then using that to build and expand out your landscape. It's not enough just to run a webinar. Today we'll be sharing this webinar in lots of other channels, lots of other places. Same idea with Logarithm. When we produced content, it had to go out to a wide array of sources, and ensuring content had, the right schema, the right language, the right verification points was a great way to ensure it got picked up across, other locations, that it was shared on industry news sites. It was easily uploaded to YouTube or Bright Talk or our social channels. Highlighted up top, it's a little small to see, but is also GitHub, right? A very technical location that's going to require lots of verification, right? A breadcrumb of when information is being updated, by who, why, how recently, etc. And then the last part we've talked about is, highlight your individuals and ensure that they're trustworthy. Great way to do that, be alongside trusted experts. In the bottom, we had a speaker on the right from Logarithm, and he was joining Randy Franklin Smith. First of all, if you're using your middle name every time, you're going to be trustworthy, right? You're putting your name out, you're building a brand. And Randy did a great job of that. He had worked in Windows security for decades, number of products, number of tools, weekly updates about what's been happening, the security information, the implications. So the technical side, we spoke a lot about the tools, the structure, the data, but also it's the company that you keep and earning that company as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Graham. But to kind of put these two together, I know Graham talked about the technical foundations of getting seen. And it definitely sets the stage of how do you actually get your resources, which is where people go to chat tools like AI and Perplexity. and they're asking questions, and what pops up as the answer. And Graham kind of touched on that before, where things like Yelp reviews and Google reviews, but on top of that, it's social content too. And that's really the part where, yes, you can use a technical foundation to get seen in AI, where your audience is asking questions and you're the answer, but how do I actually become the answer? And on top of that, how do I become the trusted answer as well? And that's really the important part of, not only do I want to get picked up by AI, but also I want my brand to be trustworthy as well when people or audiences do go to your channels and they do check you, because that's also part of the process where they actually see the resources on those AI tools, but do they actually trust you when they go there? What does that impression look like? And with that, we'll go to the next slide. And so to kind of think about it, it's AI gets you seen, right? People are asking questions on AI for business solutions, and they have questions. What comes up as the answer? Of course, the most important thing is you want to come up as the answer. Your brand wants to come up as the answer, but how does that happen? And again, I know Graham touched upon that before, using those specific types of tools. And again, I know Graham talked about using AI to create the type of content where it is made to get read by AI. So whether that's super simple ways to make it readable for AI, because again, a robot, so it's going to read like a robot. But if you've gone through any social channels recently, or even gone on your own feed, you've probably seen it about 1,000 times. It's the same type of content regurgitated over and over again. And especially when you kind of get into the groove of writing your own content using AI, you know it comes up with the same things over and over again. And I do kind of see it almost as like an AI feed fatigue is what I like to call it, because how many times have you been on your social feed and you see the same type of wording over and over again? Even like Eric said before, the word actually or isn't is. And once you start to pick up that type of cadence, when you do see social content, especially you put yourself in the shoes of someone who's going to your social profile and seeing those, it's not super intentional and it's not really capturing your brand voice and brand personality. Like, yes, AI can totally give you the structure that you need to get picked up and be discovered, but it will never convey that trust and credibility when you're just using AI prompts. And one thing too that I like to say is you can give AI like what you think is the best prompt in the world, and it still won't really capture your brand voice and brand personality. Only you and your brand know your target audience, the questions that people or your audience has, and of course, you know the answer. And that's really where the social content comes in, because your social content is now the answer. And that's really how you bring in that brand voice, because you can be putting out all the social content written by AI. People are going to notice that it doesn't look genuine, it doesn't look intentional, and it can kind of rub people the wrong way, especially if they're in like a decision-making stage, because you've, come up on an AI tool and they're a resource. So when you do come up as a resource and your content isn't just reflecting that intention, that's where you're going to start to lose that gap in between the process. And to think about it, when you have content, it's really about being able to have the human eye editing it, because yes, it's all about using AI to come up with those answers and create the post in the way where it's scannable and easy to read for AI tools. But the most important part of it is human editing as well. So you need to add your brand personality in there, add your brand voice. And like I said before, only you know your brand audience. And it really comes down to, for example, even tone. Are you adding a little bit of humor to it? And that's a really simple thing too. Are you adding some sort of references that your target audience would understand? And even, is it even clear as well? What are you trying to get at in your social post? I know 1,000 times for me, at least, when I go to AI to write a piece of social content, it almost never gets to the point. And AI kind of takes it in its own direction. So being able to really hone in on what you're trying to say in your social content as well. And that ultimately gives you credibility on top of that, because it shows that you know what you're talking about, you know your audience, and what those answers are to the questions they have. And when you start to human edit it, that's where really the trust comes in, because anyone can just scroll a feed and see the same social post over and over again. But what stops people is things they recognize, things that are super specific to maybe that topic, that expertise. And it's also intentional as well. Even when you go to use AI to create social content, but you're editing it intentionally. Is this for my audience? would I actually read it? That's a huge thing too. Would I read it and stop and engage with it? Because really what it comes down to is social media is all about engagement, right? And even though that we are using it now to get seen in AI, again, strip all that away. Social media is all about getting in front of the right people and being engaging as well. That's really what social media was made for. So if it's not engaging, then what are you really doing with social media? And just by editing it, literally going through sentences, would I say this? There's a huge difference there. Would AI say this or would I say this? And that's really how you can really hone in your brand tone and brand personality as well. Again, you can even add your own hot takes to it. That's a really simple thing too. Adding a piece of expertise, anything like that to make it your brand and not just some piece that AI can come up with. Because again, at the end of the day, you can think you have the best AI prompt in the world and it's still not going to sound like you, and it won't understand exactly what your target audience is, because only you really know your target audience as well. And then heading to the next slide. Thank you. So talking about content. So I know we talked a little bit before about, yes, content is all about getting discovered, and it's also about being trustworthy and credible. But how do I actually create the content that's engaging and that's credible? And to kind of go off of what Graham was saying before, that yes, your content needs to reflect your expertise about products and services. It absolutely does. But that's not like the end all be all to your strategy, because again, you put yourself in the example of someone wants to answer questions on a business solution. They go to your social profile because that's the resource. They're not going to want to scroll every single post that's CTA driven or promotion driven. Again, that's not really what social media is about, but yes, it's still important to get picked up and be discoverable, but it's also really about the engagement style content. And what exactly is engagement style content? Kind of like what Graham was saying before, you have that type of content where it's people's faces, it's the expertise. It's a type of content that doesn't really have a CTA around it, doesn't have a promotion, but it's showing the people behind the scenes, the people behind the brand. And that's always going to move the needle as well, because it's not necessarily anything that AI needs to be, involved in, of course, for discoverability, but it's showing your brand more than just what you have your products and services about. It's showing who's actually behind that brand. And even, for example, too, engagement style content, whether it's B2C or B2B, a good example for a B2C is maybe it's, a behind the scenes, or maybe it's super simple and you're just following a trend. Because again, when you do those types of pieces of content, it's intentional. It's not just an AI, prompt driven post. It's actually something that you're adding value to, and you're still showing expertise because one, you're in the space and you're posting consistently, but it's intentional and it's really mirroring your brand voice and brand personality as well. It's not just anything that someone can just type into your AI prompt. And also too, anytime that you have a human face on there, it's so important. Even for like B2B brands, for example, I know as a community manager, anytime that I post social posts for like an employee spotlight, it gets crazy engagement because people just want to connect with other people and they want to see the faces behind the brand as well. And that's really where like credibility and trust comes in, because you're not just using social media as like a promotion tool, but you're using it in the way where you're creating trust and creating expertise at the same time as well. And to kind of, put those together, again, visibility does get you the attention, but connecting with your audience is how you keep them engaged. And that's just as important as, being discovered as well. And a really good example of this too, I know Eric mentioned before, especially LinkedIn now, if you're, again, going to AI and asking, questions for business solutions, typically LinkedIn is going to be picked up as an answer now because it's such a credible source. And it's almost like a twofold as well, especially in thought leadership for B2B brands. If you're in conversations of your expertise and topics, one, it's going to act as a place where you are spreading that expertise and trust and credibility, but you're also part of a bigger conversation where you're adding that expertise and you're engaging with other people in the same space. Because yes, one, you are building authority, but you're also building trust as well. And it's not typically the same thing as, say, creating a one-off engagement style post. but you're also part of the conversation as well, which is engaging. So being able to use, especially LinkedIn now, as a place to be able to show up in the conversation and be engaging as well. Because again, it's all about engagement too, especially for B2B brands as well. If people go to the leadership profiles, they also want to see what they're doing as well. So it's not just your brand, but it's also thought leadership too, and the leadership as well. Because again, it's also engagement style content, right? Because you're creating conversations, you're using your brand expertise and your actual tone and personality to fuel how you're being discovered on AI as well. And heading into the next slide. So one example here that I wanted to show is how you can use AI to create a social post. Because again, we talk about using AI to create the structure of it. And this is kind of an example here where you have short sentences that are scannable and easy to read, but you're adding your brand tone and brand personality to it as well. So again, maybe it's a specific hot take, or it's maybe it's even a little bit of a joke in there too. Like anything that you can make it your brand and your tone and personality. Because again, what's going to stop people from scrolling is actually seeing things that they connect with. Because again, social media is all about connecting. So you're going to want to align both of those things where, again, like Graham was talking about before, having the tools to show up in discoverability, using AI to structure the content where AI can pick it up. But on top of that, really heavily human editing it, where it's actually connecting and engaging with people. Because again, you can get discovered on AI, but if they don't connect with your social posts, it's never, I'm not going to say never, but you might lessen your chance of moving the needle as well. And people don't want to see the same social content over and over again because it's not genuine and not intentional as well. And then moving on to the next slide here. So aligning social content and technical authority. So kind of thinking about it through almost like a funnel. For example, you have technical authority, and I'll chat with Graham about that in a few minutes. But then also using that, again, to build on that structure where you have the technical authority, and then you're using those tools to be able to get shown in those AI tools, and then using social content to be able to move the needle because you're consistent and you're using content to reflect your brand tone and brand personality. And even too, Graham, I'm curious to see how you find what kind of the flow is between the technical authority and then pushing that sort of that content out, especially with using those tools like, GitHub, for example, or Google reviews, or even social content as well.
Yeah, I think the technical side, the foundation building, is what lets you build up your authority. And then I almost think of it like it's a race, right? Like you're going to pass the baton to that next stage. And that's where hopefully once that foundation's set, now you're being viewed as relevant. The content's being served in relation to what people are looking for. That final step now, that engagement that you were speaking to, massively important. The way I think of it is more and more we're seeing, right? LinkedIn, Reddit, Medium, other social areas being queried, crawled, and then recommended, and being a source or a reference often shown, right, in results. And if someone then expands on and looks into those references and continues on, the thing we don't want happening is for that to just be a data point instead of a brand interaction where people are responding, having a candid, open conversation where there's that verification of people responding and they're present and around that moment. And that's true for, content that lives on your site, thinking about blogs with articles, thinking about ways to show, verified individuals who wrote it, who you were interviewing, or on, a social post, getting somewhere where you're seeing lots of interaction. It just makes it look so much better. And it gives you a sense that this is real, this is verified from multiple users, instead of just, wow, ChatGPT went to the farthest end of the internet to find me an answer. I'm not sure if I really like that answer because no one else is engaged with it. It might have been a stretch, right? Like we want trust, we want engagement, all of that will just produce just a healthier, stronger brand moment.
Yeah, definitely. And even too, like kind of what we've been seeing before is that LinkedIn especially is getting picked up by AI tools. So, and we've talked about being part of that larger conversation with thought leadership and commenting on other social posts. So I'm actually curious to hear, like from your side with the technical authority, how that plays a role with being part of those conversations and how it gets picked up with being discovered by AI as well.
I mean, I think just building, individuals who are willing to engage is part of it. Ensuring like the technical authority, at least in my mind, LinkedIn is going to own that, right? Like they're the ones who committed to schema. They're the ones who committed to profiles getting verified, right? Everyone who's on LinkedIn has submitted an email, has a lot of verification points. So it's actually not surprising when you unwind that to think, why was LinkedIn picked up and referenced a lot? It's because they've committed to that verification for a decade plus. Now, what about Reddit? What about other social channels, right? Where if you have a Reddit profile, you're not doing a whole lot of verification, at least publicly. And that'll be really interesting to see where that heads. Reddit has a vast amount of data, topics on just about everything. And in some of those, there's really deep technical information, users expressing their interaction with a brand. I mean, even today, I was looking for like a bike for my kid. Reddit posts just constantly coming up. Two sides of the conversation. Individuals who are saying, this is great for my kid, I loved it. And then bike experts saying, I wouldn't trust this brake system. So, for that bike brand, how are you now thinking about that conversation? How are you ensuring that you're having, a strong voice? How are you providing the user experience that supports that? And then just circling back to the idea of like, where does Reddit, where do other social networks head? I'll be really curious to see like more and more, where does the requirement for verification happen? Maybe it'll be at a community level, like stronger enforcement of you have to do this to be able to post in this community. And I think we're already seeing that on Reddit, where a lot of communities are now being gated with posters having to be verified by moderators.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even too, like it's all about discovery at the end of the day as well. It's like, where are these conversations and connections happening? And I think that's really how, like you said before, it's almost like a process where you have the technical authority and then you have the social content and then you have the connection and conversations as well. And they all kind of make one, strategic process. So I definitely agree with that. But like you said too, it's really all about balancing the discoverability and the authentic connections as well, and being able to use those to create one strong strategy because you have the tools behind it. But also you have to understand that there's, in order to show up, you need to be consistent, and then you also need to have that connection as well. Because at the end of the day, how much brand personality are you going to have if you don't, if you're not in those conversations or engaging with those conversations as well? So definitely.
Yeah. Just to wrap there, like, I think even if we can all imagine, results these days coming out of LLMs, right? Whether it's Google's AI overview or you're actually in ChatGPT, you get 3 or 4 references. Like the ideal world is that you've done the technical work so that your website, your blog is one of those. And then having a brand that's present on social channels and is trusted, right, is the next part. Because those platforms did the technical work for their sites, but you need to ensure that your verifiable brand is present there. And now maybe you've owned or earned 2 or 3 of the 4 or 5 references. And that is, I think, what the goal is for brands right now, is like multiple ways to be present there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone wants the goal up to be those 3 sources as well. So yeah. And then I think we're ready for the next slide.
And that would be me. Hi. Yeah, that is so fascinating. I love how you really turn the end here into a conversation. I know for a fact that we have a very lovely and intelligent representative from a health supplements brand listening in today. And one thing we mentioned to her when we first started talking a while ago is that trust, right? Like, if you are a health and wellness brand, if you're a B2C brand where trust in your product or service is like an essential piece of the puzzle, like it's not a throwaway product that people can throw a few dollars at and not feel like they're risking anything. If it's something you put in or on your body, if you're paying for a service or for education or a class or whatever those things are, before you put your money into it, you want to trust the brand. And the first part about that is I do it all the time on ChatGPT. What are the best ways that I can improve my memory as I grow older, right? And that content comes up and it's saying lion's mane and it's saying, oh, well, people talk about this supplement, but this one isn't proven. And that it's coming from authoritative, like third-party sources, but a lot of that is coming from the brands themselves. And then when you go to, and then of course, because you're searching, you get served those ads by those same brands. When you look to their socials, you want to see that same sort of trustworthy content and content that shows that they are who they say they are, that they're providing a resource and providing leadership and that their products are safe and effective, and that as a company, they have the values that match who you are. So that was very cool. Thank you. So we want way longer than we usually do, but I think it's because we got deep in the weeds and I think it's really interesting. So we're going to move through the end here very quickly. I always end with a quick assignment for everybody who's here right now. That was a lot of information that was shared very quickly. All I ask that you do is, if you have a pen and paper by you, or which I always do, I rely way too much on my to-do notes. If you can put this up on the computer, if you want to take a screenshot, but I would love for you, before we get into Q&A, or as we do, since we're really running late, write down 2 things that you found useful today. And I will say, I would love for you to share those with us, either in the chat or email me directly. 2 things you found useful. And this is the critical one. Write down 1 thing that you can do as soon as this call is over, or sometime today before the end of the week. 1 thing that you learned that you can put into practice immediately. There's a lot of information there. This will be living on YouTube forever. Send a follow-up, but really, like, what can you take from this, from all of that stuff that we talked about today? What's the 1 thing that you can do moving forward to make it really useful and to set something, to set that intention? So please write that down right now. What are you going to do as soon as we get off this call, or after lunch, whatever that is, that's going to move things forward for you? And if you want to put it into the comments, we would be so grateful as well. And like I said, you can email us, which takes us to the next slide, the Q&A. So we would love to talk to you. Obviously, we're not doing the full pitch today. We're just here to teach and to learn and to have a really good conversation. If you want more, if you want to set up a consult or a discovery call, or just have some basic questions, or want to provide us feedback, you have Graham's email, you have my email. If you want to write to Jenna, she's pretty awesome. It's Jenna@WideFoc.us. But we would love to hear from you after this. And there are only a few of us left on the call, but if you have a question, please pop it into the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to ask Jenna, well, a Graham moving to Jenna question, which is, so, when we work together, Graham, you guys are setting up the technical side, and you're thinking about the SEO or GEO terms, content pillars, important things that need to be reflected on the website, on the blog post, which we might be writing for the client, and in social. Like, how do you structure that, and then to provide to our team or a social team to make that useful? And then Jenna, maybe you can follow up with how we take it. And I don't know if we're going to have time because we have a minute, but we'll stay on for that question since it doesn't look like anybody has questions right now.
Yeah, I hear structure as two sides. How do you structure the data, the content, the blog, so that it can be well received, it can be crawled, queried, presented elsewhere? And then what is the structure for the content that you're trying to produce? So, we have a campaign that the two agencies are working on. Maybe it's a new product, maybe it's a new market. How do we think about where that is going in ways that we can, speak to the product, speak to the service, but also speak to how individuals use it? How is it being, evaluated against competitors? How is it, now living in ecosystems where there is discussion around it, and finding the types of topics that have enough search interest, that we can measure and actually follow, presenting that to your team, and then just really trying to find a way to work with content producers who can create something that's beautiful and that's going to really flesh that out in a meaningful way for a brand.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I even think too is like coming from like the social media side, I think it would be beneficial to take a look at, okay, what kind of content can I make for my products and services? And yes, it's great to be picked up by AI and be discoverable on your expertise. But it's also, okay, I have the social content that does that. Maybe has a CTA on it. And then thinking about what type of other content pillars that I should put in my content strategy. How do I support my brand expertise without directly promoting my products and services, and then also not really having a CTA on it? So again, any type of engagement style content that can still kind of support your expertise, but not necessarily saying, hey, these are my products and services and this is why it's great. But maybe you can find a certain angle on, a specific topic, or maybe going to AI and saying, what kind of, you might even know it too. You might not even have to ask AI, what are the questions that my target audience has? And it doesn't necessarily have to be your products and services, but it can be around that. And it still shows your expertise, but in a way that's engaging as well. Because again, like Graham said, also being part of those conversations is super important too. So it's not even just posting the promotional content and promoting or posting the engagement style content, but how can I become part of conversations in that topic as well? Because, engaging and being part of those topics is also part of a social strategy as well. So maybe that includes monitoring, answering people's questions, or just being part of a conversation, like a thought leadership post on LinkedIn as well, being part of that conversation. And it still, adds to that credibility and visibility without you having to, promote your products and services as well.
Nice. Yeah. And this is a super secret piece of information for the last 4 viewers who are still sticking with us. Employee profiles, leadership profiles, highlights of the people who are working for you or working in your organization. First of all, on B2C and B2B, for us, we're seeing it in reports again and again. That is the top performing content. It works really, really well. And that's a way to show expertise, because in the profile, you can show the chops that they have, the expertise, the background. And that's a really great way to both show your experience, the expertise, and the services that you provide, while making it very human and connecting on a personal level with people, no matter what. On Instagram, on LinkedIn, if we show a picture of an employee and share who they are and what they do and why they're special, people love it. And you get internal buy-in because people from your organization reshare it. Oh, I love Patty. She's amazing. Like, you just get that ancillary effect and the goodwill. Well, we went way over, but it was really cool. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And please reach out if you have any questions, whether you're watching this now or watching the stream later. And Graham, thanks as always for being such a great partner and for joining us. Jenna, thanks for crushing it as you do. And we'd also love to hear from everybody what kind of webinars you'd like to hear next. Thanks, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks.